And let's make sure. So you should see up on the screen that same Apple natal chart with the quintiles up there. Right away, though, we're going to move away from the quintiles because although, I said that's a powerful cycle, especially when you're dealing with those long-term moves. I'm sure you noted on your own, maybe, hopefully you got down to drawing down some charts. But yeah, on any scale, on a daily scale, on a smaller time frame using the moon, yeah, quintiles are very powerful, no question. We will get into them heavily tomorrow, especially the relationship of the sun and the moon with them, the quintiles and biquintiles. But generally, all aspects or transits are important. And yes, the trines and squares are good to look at, there's no question. So I had a bunch of people ask me, well, what about trines and squares? I've always heard, and the conjunctions and the oppositions. Yes, definitely, no question. They're all important. Quintiles, I find, if you want to know my opinion, they have a good, which many people have brought up before, this is not my own original thought, that they are a good trigger. They're a good trigger point. They bring up a point in time when you're entering or pulling away from trines and squares. They're the entry into a time when you're entering that special zone of a trine and a square. And then also when you pull away, it's the 288, the quintile, the last quintile before the 360-degree full turn. What you're dealing with is the entry and exits from those big times, or these strongest aspects. And so if you're thinking about trading, maybe if you're thinking about pure astrology, trine and square, maybe a negative and a positive, or a positive and negative, trines being positive, squares being negative in that classic astrology sense. Maybe that's important, but when you want to trade into those moments, where do you begin? That's why we begin with something like a quintile, because it's the entry into those moments. Yeah, the trine is going to be the biggest moment, maybe, or the square will be the high, maybe, something like that, like we saw in our last webinar. We had some great highs coming in on squares I showed you. So, it becomes a point where, is this a trading cycle, or is this an astrological cycle, or is this a pure geometry? Well, when it comes down to it, you'll see that even in our last webinar, counting bars becomes important. The 70-second bar of any time frame is important in a trend. This kind of thing, these numbers come up over and over again. And so yes, 72 degrees, it's important. It brings us into the time of trines and squares, which might be the points in time when we have our highest highs and our lowest lows. But trading into them, you would be starting with your quintile, and that just makes sense to me. And it always has, been when I'm trading, quintiles are what I focus on, and then I see where we're going to go from there. But to open it up a little bit, especially into the moon, because the moon can get very tight, lots of drawing, lots of lines. Let's move to a trine immediately. Now, if you have trouble with this kind of stuff, just Google it for now. I'm not really an astrology teacher. If you have no background at all in astrology, I have heard a little bit from people that they didn't grasp everything from the first two webinars, but I don't want to dwell on it because we do need to move on into something more advanced. We're going to have to do some more advanced astrology. But I've got a couple things here, just Googling astrological symbols if you need to know what an astrological symbol looks like. But I've also got it here on your circle chart here. Okay, so all the names, the degrees, and the symbols are there for you. And you've got your different major aspects. Again, I'm just Googling major aspects, planetary aspects, nothing special. There's probably 100 books with a bunch of different ways these things are described to you, but these are the symbols, and those are the degrees that we focus on. When you say 90 degrees, that means that we're breaking a circle into segments of 90 degrees. And that's our major aspect. So if our square aspects, we would have 4 points. You can see here we have quintiles, okay, 72 degrees. That means that we're breaking it up to 72-degree segments, meaning that it's broken up into 5. And you can see the pentagram there that they're using. So basically, if you have no idea what an aspect is, don't worry too much about it. Essentially, it's an angular relationship that we're representing on this circle. Okay, but you know, if you need help with this kind of thing, if you have no idea, you know, let me know. Maybe I can dig up some better resources for you. But I think that just, you know, I'll send you this JPEG. I'll send you this just if you need these kinds of things to reference for yourself. Okay. Now, I'm also going to be using today this simplistic ephemeris again, because, you know, again, not everybody has GANTrader, but all of this stuff is much easier and faster and more advanced, obviously, in something that it does this stuff automatically for you. And that's why, you know, if you feel like it's cumbersome and you feel like what I'm doing, especially now with the moon, it's going to be more stuff going on. You know, it's going to be a lot of drawing. If that's difficult for you, well, this is where I would suggest you try out GANTrader, okay? Because it's going to hyperspeed all these things or put all these things into hyperspeed for you, make them very easy for you to lay out in many different ways. You should have received an email from GANTrader. If you haven't, let me know. Or from Optima, they should have enabled your free trial if you haven't had it yet. And also if you had it previously, it should be re-enabled. So let me know if that didn't happen for you. Okay. So seems as though everybody's here. We're recording, we're going on. Let's get started. So I've got here my Apple natal ephemeris. I've got my natal Jupiter. We'll begin with that again. I know that it's harping on Jupiter, going on a little bit too much about it maybe, but we'll focus on that and then we'll move on. But I do use almost exclusively sometimes Jupiter and Saturn. So, and we'll focus on that a little bit. I'll show you a chart with Bitcoin later. Now I'm going to open up a chart, a blank chart to go with this. So I've got basically what we're going to create on the screen in front of you, but I'll go in and we'll create a new chart. So from scratch, just going to choose Apple again. We're going to start with Apple again. Now this is going to be a longer webinar, just so you know. I might go long here, no big deal. We're going to go down to an hourly. Okay, when I'm using the moon, okay, use the moon. If I'm only using one cycle, if I'm focusing on one planet, which is possible, don't get me wrong, you can do it that way, especially once you kind of get the drift of what's going on. It's possible to use just one simple cycle. Jupiter's a great one. You know, we're going to use the natal transit cycle of Jupiter. But, you know, an hourly chart is good enough when you want to see every detail, when you want to trade every day, when you want to see the up and down of every motion. You have to get down on maybe a 4-minute chart. You need to be able to see a lot of data on that 4-minute chart so that you can do some back testing. And, you know, a 4-minute chart allows you to be, you know, mathematically in sync with the moon cycle. I won't get too deep into the numerology of the moon with you, okay? You can watch a million videos on YouTube about that. So when we get down to putting it into a 4-minute, I'm going to go into Optima. It's a little bit easier, but you realize that basically the tinier and tinier you get on this stuff, the more cycles you start to focus on, the more, you know, turns that you start to define for yourself, but it also becomes a lot more to map out, a lot more charting for you every day. So it's a personal, it's sort of like how you trade. You know, I've kind of been harping about that a little bit too. It's always dependent. Which cycle do you use? Well, how do you trade? That's what that would be my first question. Do you trade long term? Would you trade every day? Well, if you don't trade every day at all, or if you're never looking at an hourly chart and you're always looking at weeklies and monthlies, the moon is not exactly the best situation to be looking at. You know, it's very fast. You can definitely look at the eclipse cycle, and we'll look a little bit at that. If we don't get it today, we'll definitely look at it tomorrow. But basically, you know, the moon is for intraday trading. And that's why I'm using the moon today for an hourly chart. And the hourly chart is basically the maximum you want to be using, you know. So let's take a look here closer. First of all, I'm going to separate out the volume. I'm going to put it on its own pane here. Tomorrow, we're going to focus heavily on volume, and it's going to be hopefully pretty enlightening for you. But that's going to be a more advanced sort of approach. So I'm going to just put it in a pane above, and then I'm going to double click and just get rid of it for now. Okay. So again, if you're working in a free account, you can just work in a free account with TradingView. This works just fine. Okay. So at 187, if we were going to go up in degrees by 120 degrees rather than by 72 degrees like we did before, well, it would just be the same process of, instead of going around this circle and stopping here at 72 degrees and making a point, we would just continue up around and go to 120 degrees beyond 187, which is natal Jupiter. Now, I'm not going to look up the ephemeris again on the natal chart. Just know that natal Jupiter, as in the place that Jupiter was geocentrically on the date of Apple's birth, the first trade, was 187 degrees. And so I'm going to grab my calculator for you. We can do this together real simple. Okay, so 187 plus 120, 307. So 307. Let's just mark that on my circle here. You would do this at home on your own. Okay, so let's get that here. 307 is somewhere about there. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect. And, you know, we can draw a circle, a line, a straight line right over there across the circle. Now let's add another 120 degrees to that because we want to see the double trine as well. 427. Well, we know that we've gone past 0 degrees now, so let's subtract 360. So we have a number within 360 degrees. And this is going to be our double trine, 67 degrees. Okay, so 67 degrees is somewhere about here. You can see 50, 60, 70. Okay, just over here in Gemini. So we have one point here, which is natal Jupiter. We have one point over here, which is 120 degrees from that point. And we have another point over here, which is 240 degrees in total from that point, which is actually 120 degrees back there. And I'm sure you noticed that if I just kind of, you know, sketch a triangle very crudely, just using my mouse, so obviously it's difficult, we've got a triangle there, and that's what we're doing. So if you're going to create, I showed you how this was a 72 degrees, that was a 5-point star. Well, in this case, it's a little simpler. There's less points, it's a triangle. All right, and now we've got all we need, just like we did the other day, basically to begin with this stuff and, you know, work out all of these percentages for all of those places in the ways that we can break up our boxes. And again, on an hourly chart, so we're going to have to find the time of day when the moon crossed certain degrees. That way we can get it labeled and drawn onto the chart. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, beyond this setting up of our natal points, you know, we've got our labeled degrees here. Okay, let's actually 187. So we've got our 307. Oh, that's some great writing. And we've got, let's actually just copy this over since I've got this here. So I've worked out those numbers already for you. Copy and paste. Okay, that's a little easy. So you can see the 187, 307, and 67 labeled as they are 120 degrees from that natal position and 240 degrees from the natal position. And then I'm also working out the percentage or the, you know, the portion of this 360 degree cycle that these numbers are. So 67 degrees is actually, if 360 was 100% of a cycle, then 67 degrees of that cycle is 18% and change. That's what that means. And that's what we do to get those proportions that we can lay into our Gantt box. We did this a little bit the other day. You can see the percentages, okay, for the quintiles still on that circle there, okay. But you can see 307 and 67 down here, and those are the percentages, 18, 85, and 51 basically, okay. But I've gotten that more exact number for you. Now, tomorrow we're going to focus a lot more on ratio. Well, I've already mentioned it a little bit, and it's so important because it really is something that, well, it plagues a lot of traders with this kind of stuff. They try to find this perfect ratio that works perfectly for their market, and it always works. And when it stops working, they become devastated, and you know, these kinds of things happen. I'm going to show you ratio is a pure, you know, relationship to volume. It has as the market speeds up and the volume increases, we definitely see an increase in ratio. But today we're just going to work with one or two ratios. I'm going to get through laying out a simplistic view of Apple, you know, as it is now. So we're going to use, like we were using $5 or 50 cents per degree on the daily, we're going to go down and use 5 cents per degree on our hourly, okay? So if we're going to use 5 cents per degree, we're taking the positions of the circle, right? The 0 degree position. We're going to place it down starting at $0. We're going to lay down 5 cents per degree. And if we take our circle, 360 degrees, and we multiply it by 0.055 cents per degree, we get $18. That means that cycles of 360 degrees at 5 cents per degree are $18. Okay, so I'm going to take my horizontal line and I'll place it here. I know that, well, actually, I'll just start going through here. We've got 18 plus 18, so 36. We can put one there at 36. Okay. I'm sure you know that there's probably ways you can automate this kind of thing for yourself, just going through the pure manual process, okay? For those who might be finding this kind of thing difficult, if you're finding this too simple, don't worry, it will get complex very soon. So we're just laying down those 360-degree circles in price, right? So we got a $54, which is only 18 from 36. You know, we're moving up 360 degrees, 360 degrees of price, right? Let's just keep going. 72, 90, right? I'm gonna take my time here, make sure I get it perfect for you. Equals 108. $126. You know, once you have these things set, you don't have to change them ever, right? You've got them forever. This is your set of lines that are 5 cents per degree, right? Oops, 144, and so on, right? Market goes further, this continues and goes on. You know that we just had a split on Apple, so obviously this was much higher before. All right. And now that we've got that, let's just push this aside here, this text. What we need to do now, just like we did with the sun when we were doing that work yesterday, or sorry, last week, we're going to have to look at the ephemeris to find the day that, well, first of all, we're going to find the day that the moon crossed 0 degrees, as in 0 degrees Aries. So we want to find the day that the moon went around this circle and passed 0 degrees, because we know that that is $0. And that's going to help us lay what will be basically a picture of the moon as price. And we know that that basically with the sun on the daily chart, well, that really helped us see price structures on a daily. Well, what about on our hourly chart for our intraday trading? Okay, so let's pull up here. I've got an ephemeris, and basically from the big ephemeris, from this your Astro tools here, We were looking at this last week. Again, if you've got your own ephemeris, no need to fumble around with this one. This is pretty simplistic. But the ephemeris tables, you can basically go in here and search here, okay? And then you can search every time that the moon crosses 0 degrees. But unfortunately, with this system here, it's going to give you only a rough estimate. You can't really look at just 0 degrees. If you look at a day where, well, there will only be a few days where, how it basically generalizes each day's degree of the moon, okay? And it gives it a sort of an average price of, an average degree of the day. So if I search just Aries 0 degrees, it's going to pick out a day from this range of years when the moon was exactly at 0 degrees Aries by some sort of calculation that they're referring to. So basically the idea is this: you've got to search out a range, okay? So you've got to search out when is the moon at 0 to 10 degrees Aries, and that's going to give you a general timing, and then you can zoom in a little bit. And once you get one, you can hinge off of that date, and you don't need to keep looking up and searching when the moon is at 0 degrees Aries. It's about once a month, about 29.5 days, you know. So let's look at this. So if I hit OK, it's, oh, let me specify my range a little more. Let's just look at 2020. Okay. All right. So let's look towards some time recently. I'll pull off this frame here so we can look at both windows together. Okay. Don't forget about that circle. We're going to go back to it. Okay. And so I've got here, let's go back to maybe June, April. Let's see, back here, we've got all the way to June here. So that's probably enough time to look at for now. All right, so we've got a time here in June when, if you look at that pop-up window, the moon was at 7 degrees Aries. So it's close enough that we can zoom in on here, we can click on this date, and then I can shift over the structure of the ephemeris to find the exact moment in time when the moon was at 0 degrees Aries. And we can find basically to the hour, which is exactly what we need. So I'll click on here, and you can see basically, let's edit here because we're set to the right date, okay? But we need to make sure that we're set to New York for Apple, okay? So any American stock, if you're trading the actual stock and it's on the NASDAQ, you're gonna wanna be set to the New York Stock Exchange location, so it's gotta be set to that time and that location, okay? And you're obviously set to the right date because we clicked on that, okay? And set to noon, but let's just take a look. All right. Now, you don't have to understand anything you see here. We just want to confirm we're in New York and we're on the right day around June 14th. Was that the date that we were looking at? Well, it's close enough because we can see here, planetary position, the moon is at 9 degrees. Okay. Now, let's just take a look right here. I can see positions. And now I don't have to worry about the circle too much. You know, you don't see that circle gives you some sort of understanding that, you know, that astrological chart is somewhat what we're seeing here, but this is a very simplistic form of it that we're breaking down the elements to just what we need for trading. All of that astrology data, if you are an astrologer, you might use that for other things. But generally, I would say that this is the kind of information you mostly need. You need to know when, you know, a certain degree occurs, okay? So here I go. I want to know when the moon is at 0 degrees. I can browse by every 10 minutes. I can just click over. And now the moon is at 9 degrees still. I can click over and maybe, you know, maybe, okay, I've got to go by the hour now. Then I can move back. Now this is really rudimentary, very crude, right? I mean, hey, if you want to know how people did this before things like Optima existed, this is exactly how you did it. And you know what, if you had a book of ephemeris dates, it would be even more difficult to use the moon. But once you get this set on the chart, well, the chart is actually gonna put this all into hyperspeed for you too, even a simplistic chart using GAN boxes, okay? So we're getting close there. The moon is nearly at 0 degrees, all right? All right, so we know that within this hour, between on June 13th, between 4:40 and 5:40, the moon crossed 0 degrees. So basically at 5 p.m. on June 13th, we can put a line there. So let's pull up our chart here. June 13th. June 13th. Oh, look at that. It's on the weekend. So I've got this really bright blue line. Let's turn it to something a little more faint just for now. Let's get it dotted. Okay. So the moon at, let's say, that's Friday on the 12th. So if we pull our coordinates over, we're going to go to the Monday morning. Let's set it to the Monday morning, our first moment. So basically the idea is that if this is 0 degrees, $72 here, we went up from 0, remember $18 at a time. Well, this is a point here, right there. If we started a line and drew it outwards, whoops, didn't want to grab that, and drew it outwards, upwards from here, we could trace at a certain amount of dollars per degree, which in this case, we've got it set to 5 cents per degree. We could draw the position of the moon right onto the screen, just like we did with the sun in the last webinar. And this is how we're going to begin. So using this point, 0 degrees, but also the next point, right? We need not just this one, but we need the next one. Now we can do some arbitrary calculation of an exact timing. People like to use a certain amount of time, that the amount of hours in an exact lunar month, and set cycles. I find that because, especially now, right now, if you notice, we're using Apple, and it's got trading days, and we're dealing with immediately a weekend, right? Well, that immediately shows you, or it should, that you're going to be dealing with, first of all, if I drew a straight line of the moon, it's sort of an average of the moon. It's not really going to be the true moon's position, because I can't draw the in-betweens. I can't draw where the moon is on the weekend. But it's going to be close enough, and you'll see. For our use right in here, it'll be close enough. You get into Optima, and it draws the actual position of the moon. Well, that becomes something that you can use, the actual position of the moon, and you can see it change, and it'll draw that weekend in for you. Now, this is not the right day. Oh, yeah, that's right, the 13th. Yeah, here we are, June 13th. Okay, so that's the Monday. And then let's go 1 month ahead, okay? It's about 1 month, and then we straighten ourselves out. We realign ourselves. It's crude, but it's just an easy way to do it. We know it's about a month for one lunar cycle. Close enough, okay? And you can see here, the moon is now at here, 32 degrees here, okay? So let's move it here, set it to a 1 hour move, and go back in time. You can see here, the longitude changing. And let's get it back down to 0. Maybe we need to go by the day still. Getting down close now, 4 degrees. Let's see, every 1 hour. Closer, 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 closer. If you have an easier way to do this, please go ahead and do it, okay? This is going to get close enough. So that's 1 a.m. on July 11th. So basically, we know that just about, we've got it right. The next lunar date when it crosses 0 degrees, when the moon has made 1 full cycle around this circle, we know that the date is July 11th. And it's at 1 a.m. And we know that's after market. So we'll put it the next day in the morning as the market opens. Okay, what was that date? July 11th. Oh, July 11th is also on a weekend, so it'll go on the Monday morning, July 13th at 9:30. There you go. So this line right here of price is basically set perfectly between 1 full lunar cycle. Let's move it into the future. Let's go to the next one, okay? Simple now, we know the process. 1 month ahead, go ahead. We're a little bit ahead here, 1 day. We'll knock off those degrees. Okay, almost there. Guess I've got to click it a little slower. There we go. So about 9 a.m. on the 7th of August. Oops. Once you've got that stuff set, whoops. Sorry guys, let me just get rid of that. Yes, I want to exit that. And we're set correctly. Okay, sorry, we're back to where we were. All right, let's move this over. Having a little trouble. If I hit control and I grab that and I pull it over, I get a new one. And we've set it to August 7th, 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. All right, there it is. Okay, now I'm sure you're noticing already, I mean, on an intraday level, well, you're getting some pretty good times. And those are just the moments that the price is crossing, or sorry, the moon is crossing 0 degrees Aries, right? The next ones so that we've got it. Okay, so that when we start laying this stuff out, but I'm sure that you see how simple it is. Once you've got one, you just move to the next month, and then you move back a little bit so that you get the right degree back to 0. You can move up by the day at first, and then zoom in on by the hour. So the moon back to 0, to the hour, up to 0. And well, there you go. September 3rd, 1640. So September 3rd, that's coming up soon. 1640. So the end of the day. Let's put it at the end of the day. Or you could put it in the morning the next day. It doesn't matter. It's one bar. All right. And so there's your lunar grid. Essentially, you're seeing the points in time when the moon crosses 0 degrees. And you're seeing the 0 degree line as well. You're seeing basically this effect of some support and resistance and the breakthrough moments on being related to the 360 degree marker, right? Resistance there, resistance there. And if I were to take a trend line, just a standard trend line, and I'll place it down here and we'll get it exact, right? You can place it right on 72 and 90. And right on June 15th, you can basically get it to the hour just right? You can actually just look at the coordinates of your 92, right? Of your vertical line, -92, then click on here, just pop it down to -92, and you know that those two coordinates are perfectly locked in place together. So it sets the price and the time exactly. And you know that that's basically the moon in that position. And if I were to take this position here and move it up like that, that's the moon moving up there. All right. Now, also, we know that we've got these points on this circle. Okay. And so how do we lay these points, not only in time, but also in price the last time? First of all, we were using planets the last time, and we were using the sun going around and also the planets. But if this time we're using the moon's cycle, well, we're just going to map the points in time when the moon crosses these points. Okay. So first of all, we're going to get the point in time when the moon is at 187 degrees. Now, that's pretty simple. All we need to do is take a box, a GAN box. All right, let's put it here. Let's move into this next zone. I'll show you how this all connects. Let's move into this next point where we've got more data all in this one box. And also, in general, the market's moving faster nowadays in the last while, obviously. And obviously, the market was moving slower here. And maybe the settings would be different for this area. Maybe 5 cents per degree is a little too much for this area. Okay, but it's definitely working here a little bit closer. And there's always an opportunity to set up multiple forms of geometry for yourself. Or there's a logic generally that you can use that if the market's moving at half the speed, well, it's going to work out at half the geometry that you're seeing of the planetary structures. But let's move on from there. So we've got our plain old GAN box. So I'm going to lay one in right into the spot here. Now you can see it's already set up kind of strangely because I was playing around with it and testing out my ideas. So here we are, set it to 90 and 108. Just setting it to the 0 degree marks, right? Want that perfectly vertical, the perfect horizontal prices to be perfect to the 360 degree markers. And now let's zoom in on the timing. We've got here July 13th. I can just look at the actual coordinate 41. and punch it in. Oh, okay, it's basically right. And I could look here, 175, 175. So the box is perfectly put into the cycle here of the moon. All right, you know, when the moon crosses 0 degrees, let's zoom in a little closer. And now let's take the Gann box and let's pop in. Well, we know here, let's move away from all these details. Well, I like to see the 50% point in the box usually, just because that shows me the halfway point of the cycle. But by chance, because we know the halfway point of the cycle is 180 degrees and natal Jupiter is basically at 51% or 187 degrees, right? So I've got that full decimal worked out here this time at 0.519444. And you know what that number is? That's just our 187 divided by 360. It's the percentage out of 100% what this is out of 360. Okay. And that helps us, it's basically converting this circle into Gann boxes and percentages. Okay. So you've got here natal Jupiter as a price between 0 and 0 degrees, so 0 and 360 degrees. That's 180 degrees in price. Because we know that 90 was a new level of 360 degrees of price. And we know that $18 higher at a 108 is a next level. And we know that this is the point in time that is related to natal Jupiter. If this is the point in time when the moon crosses 0 degrees, well, this is the point in time when the moon crosses 51% of the circle, or 187 degrees. And we can prove that by laying a trend line from this point in the circle and putting it up here. And of course, it crosses right there. In this case, it's the center of the square, but if it wasn't, it was up here, it would be up here. And that was, that would be the case, right? So let's take a look a little deeper at this. Let's make sure our trend line is also perfectly placed, just at least in price. Put my coordinates down, 90, 108. All right, pretty good, right? Now, if I'm looking at a trine box, I've got other ratios I can add, and I can make sure that I know what I'm looking at by, keeping track of the ways, when I lay this box down, maybe I'm going to choose a different color. For the harmonics, maybe I copy this box and I place it if I want to see the harmonics as a different weight in line. If I sort of copy it, place it back down. Now I've got a new box here. I can place the harmonics, which is the 120 degree position. So this 307, right? Well, we've got those percentages already worked out. Where's that box? There's that text that I've got that I copied over, right? So our point here of 307 is 85. So let's just copy this number, 85%, and change, Control C. So once you've got those worked out, you could just have them there forever, right? Let's look. Okay, well, I've already got it there too. Just copy and paste it in there, but I've already got it there. And, I can also place it in time as well, but let's not do that just yet, okay? So here we've got a price level for our trine position. If this is our 120 degrees, sorry, if this is our natal position, this is our 120 degrees from that position in price. Okay, we remember 360 degrees broken into percentages. Really basic kind of thing going on here, but I think it reveals maybe something very important to people that if you've never been using this stuff before, Anyways, so let's take our 67 degrees now. We know that was 67, and we have that number already, but I'll do the math for you in front of you. We get 67 divided by 360. And that's our double trine, our 18 degrees, or sorry, 18%. 18%, 67 degrees out of 360. Okay, and that's your double trine position. And since they are the harmonics, let's just make this circle, or this box, let's make it a lighter blue, or maybe, yeah, this sort of lighter blue will work. just something to differentiate those harmonics from the actual position of, let's move this to the back now, bring it to the, send to the back. There we go. So you can see the blue one is the natal position, and then you've got the harmonics. Okay. So what does this do? Well, it splits up that section into some new positions. And if we put the actual trine positions as well, well, that would give us some interesting information. But let me show you how you could do that maybe a little more simply than having to punch in all of these numbers. Okay. So because you've got this position, which you know actually, if you kind of think about this, this is the conjunction. This is the point in time when the moon crosses the actual position of the natal Jupiter position. This is when the moon comes around here and hits 187 degrees. So it is also a trine moment in a sense. It's part of the 120-degree structure, but also it is the conjunction point. It's the point where it actually crosses, right? And so you can, from this point, use this to define the separate cycle for yourself of the natal Jupiter transit cycle. Okay, yes, it's halfway from the point of the box here. We'll do another planet just to show you the difference of when it's not right perfectly in half like this, because this is kind of becoming a little bit deceiving, as perfect as it is being the 50% mark. But if I take this box just as it is, let's copy it over. Okay. I think you realize actually by copying these, send to the back. Okay, the blue one is in the front. If you're dealing with this kind of stuff, you're gonna have to select both of them if you start playing around with the colors, but let's try not to focus on that too much for now. But I was just trying to show you how you could keep track, just a system of keeping track which is important. And you realize that when you copy a box over, the width of each one of these cycles might vary, even though this is a lunar cycle and the lunar cycle is always the same. We put it down on trading bars. So the trading bars are a little bit off, even though it's hourly, it's closer. It's set to the hour that it crossed 0 degrees, but also you know that it's on the weekend, etc. Right? And all those little problems that we were already dealing with. So let's get it set here. So it's almost perfect, or sorry, as perfect as I can get it here. Let's cancel that. Let me get a little more perfect. What's our number? 92. 92. Okay. Anyways, it's because it's got the double box there. Let's just get rid of one of those boxes. Already becoming an issue. Okay. So now that I've moved it over, I've got here this position in our previous cycle, which is the point in time of the conjunction, and this cycle here, the end of this cycle, basically the next conjunction. So not only do I have a cycle that's showing me here when the moon crosses 0 degrees in price, right? 0 degrees Aries, but also when the trend line crosses 0 degrees. But I've also got this point in time here when it crosses the point of natal Jupiter. And now if I take my box and I place a box here, and I'm going to place it a little bit differently. I'm going to place it way down here at $72. Oops. I'm just going to use the verticals in this case. Okay. If you had a proper, in TradingView, there's not a proper way to split this up perfectly in the same way we're breaking it up with the just the verticals. Okay. So we'll use the box and we'll get rid of the horizontals. So I'm just going to map out the 120-degree points within this structure. And I don't need to enter all of these things all of the time, all of these portions all of the time. Okay, I can just go here and get this date right there and pull it over to this date right here. All right. I'm sure that if you're catching on to what I'm up to here, whoops, what I'm doing is, let me set it to $72 at the bottom there, just to be exact, even though it doesn't really matter. Whoops. Just using the verticals. I could actually set it to $0. Okay, but I want to see the percentages at the bottom. It helps me out. All right, and I could kind of go up to 180 just to get it out of there. So it's way up there. Okay, and this time, instead of breaking up the box into any kind of natal positions or anything like that, and any kind of special positions related to those broken down circles, it's already set to the broken down circle. So now I can just set those standard proportions of breaking our circle into 3. So 360, right? 120, degrees divided by 360, 0.3333, right? So for our trines, if I want to see the trines now of our Jupiter cycle here, I can just set a standard 0.333 and 0.666. And get rid of everything else. See the zeros. There we go. Oh, whoops, that was price. Sorry. Get rid of all the price levels and just put time. 666 and 333. Oops. Okay. And now you've got a box within a box. I know it's a lot of boxes, but basically being set to here. And if I actually take these, maybe I can make it a little easier to see them. Okay. This is my Jupiter conjunction, 0 degrees in a sense of the conjunction cycle, or the lunar transit cycle to natal Jupiter. Okay. That's when it actually starts its cycle there. And if I take this, what was I doing here? It's set within here. And sorry, what am I doing here? Okay. Well, anyways, now that that's set, we've got our 333, 666. That's our 120 degree points within here. Oh, I was going to make it thicker. That's all I was going to do. So actually, I've got my points here just to sort of really point them out to myself, right? You know, it starts to become a lot, right? Now, the other thing that we can do is add the harmonics of the moon, just like we did with the sun when we added the 90-degree harmonics. In this case, we can add the harmonics of the actual moon crossing through the zodiac, not really related to these proportions of the Jupiter cycle, right? So we can have more information of this sort of trend information that the moon kind of gives us as it passes through. So in this case, because we're looking at trines, I'm also going to look at the trines of the moon, the lunar cycle split into 3. And maybe what I'll do is also I'll pull this lunar. This is our lunar cycle, right? It's set to the length of the lunar cycle, but we're placing it on the beginning of the Jupiter cycle when it crosses and makes a conjunction to the natal Jupiter position. Okay. And so now you're getting that next cycle into the future of the not only our lunar cycle, which is there, okay, that's where the moon crosses 0 degrees, but then it also moves on with another box right here. Whoops. Take our Jupiter box here. Sorry, this is our lunar box, our lunar cycle box with the natal Jupiter positions put into it. We'll just copy it over. Maybe if I copy it like that, yeah, there we go. And you know that as you go into the future, you're going to have to adjust these boxes, the width, to be perfectly in line with the next cycle. Okay, already mentioned because you're dealing with trading bars, right? You can see that this point is the last point of this is the conjunction. Oops. There we go. So you can see that align there. So now let's take a look. You can see the 0 point. This is the conjunction when the moon is at the point of price, that is the natal position of Jupiter. And then this is the trine moment. It's moved 120 degrees. So you can actually see here, if I were to take this moon position now, and actually to aid that, I'm going to split our 360 degree levels also into what would be the trine positions on the actual circle, not related to the natal positions, but just related to the actual circle. It's like you're drawing, like we drew the 0 degree positions. Okay, we're going to draw the 0 degree, 120 degree hard degrees, and 240 hard degrees on the actual of price, right? Just like we have our 0 degree points here, 72 degrees, right? Or $72 being 0 degrees, 90 being 0 degrees. So I'll take this time a fib retracement, and I'll just set them here. We'll start here at 72 and going up. And let's place it perfectly 72 to 90. Okay. And I'm going to set the same thing again. I don't need all these details. I just want 333 and 666, just the trines. And this is going to help me draw the harmonics of the moon. You see these other positions within the box now that I can take this position of the moon. And now this is going to be, if I just place it here, this is my 120-degree harmonic of the moon. 120 degrees from the actual position of the moon. I'm going to make that dotted just to make it different to myself. I'll take this, place this one, copy it up, shift, place it right in the same spot, the same time division, right? And yeah, it does continue up. And you could just say extend, right? You can just say extend and it'll go up forever. But you realize that if you continue this up forever and you know that the cycles are going to differ slightly in length every time because of the trading bars, well, and the weekends and stuff like this, you're best off, especially because this is sort of like week to week that you're dealing with this kind of charting. You could just draw these lines manually each box, okay? Each cycle of 0 degrees to 0 degrees of the moon. And so let's move this one here. Rather than extending them, let's just do the same thing that we did, pretty easy to do. Oh, oops. Okay. So I got my moon here. Let's just take this one, copy it. And I've got this harmonic here. And then once we have it set, actually, yeah, we'll set that already to be dotted. There we go. So that's our lower level. And we would need to copy that in there. So you can see it's just the full 360 degrees divided by 3. And that's our trine lines of our moon. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. And we can actually just take this Fibonacci retracement, copy it up here so that we can draw our next level, the trine lines of the moon. Set it to our next level of 360 degrees, 90 to 108. All right. And now I've got an ability to take this harmonic and place it here. This next level, it's set to the length of the lunar cycle perfectly. You can see that high coming in perfectly on the trine. Now, because we're not fluctuating this geometry with the volume yet, okay, you're going to have to sort of deal with the fact that the square outs, the logic to the square outs that we were using, where the price and time of, say, 72 degrees of price, you should find, or sorry, 72 degrees of time related to the sun moving around the natal Jupiter cycle, or in this case, the moon, or also when we were dealing with Jupiter actually crossing. Well, basically, what was I going to say here? The square outs are not going to be perfect every time. That's what I want to say, until you start fluctuating your geometry. So here you have, let's say, this is the idea. Already we have a perfect structure. We can start to analyze, okay? If this point in time here is the conjunction, this is the point in time here when the moon, we know when the moon crossed 0 degrees, that was the point that we pulled out of the ephemeris. The moon is crossing up, and this is the point of the conjunction right here. So the moon has crossed up a certain amount of degrees, right? And at that point, the moon should be at exactly 187 degrees. And we know it's at 187 degrees, right? If this is 0 degrees here at $90, the moon has moved up 187 degrees because that's the 51% mark there, 51.9% mark. So that's how we know it's 187 degrees. And so the idea is that at this point, we should be finding that the price is actually at the crossing right here or right here. But it's not, and you can see that. But as you can see, it's perfectly between the two. It's perfectly between the two. And this is because the geometry at this point is working at exactly half. But at this point in time, I would say that it's common to find that if the conjunction is here, right? If the conjunction is at this time, that means that the moon is here, all right? That's what we're seeing here. The moon is here. It's moved up from 0 degrees to 187 degrees. It's moved from here to here. If the moon, if the price is not right at the moon, and it's not at the moon down here, well, what it is it's actually exactly opposite of this position on the circle. Okay, crossing right through that middle point there. All right, I'll just crudely draw the point here, right across. All right, something like that. And so the point would be, exactly 180 degrees plus. So basically 7 degrees, right? 180 degrees plus 180 gives you 7 degrees. So it's just over 0 degrees. And you can see that the price right here is just over 0 degrees. 0 degrees of price being $90. So truly, the price is opposite of the natal position. And the natal position at that moment is being crossed by the moon. So this is a conjunction, and you're getting a planetary price square out at 0 degrees, around, just over 0 degrees Aureus of price. And this is not giving you an exact square out where the price is actually at the crossing, because volume didn't allow it to happen. And I'll prove it to you later, or maybe tomorrow, but the idea would be that you can see here a downtrend in volume in general. From this point here, you can see that there is a downtrend occurring, especially if I were to pull out, say, a moving average. It's not as steep as that, but there is a downtrend in volume here. Okay. And so the idea is that from the beginning of this trend, by the time it got to the conjunction, volume, it might be even half the amount on average, which would mean that our position only works out to half the position or target that it could have, which in this case is exactly opposite, half the amount. But we'll get into this kind of analysis a little bit further tomorrow, okay? I want to just move on with the same kind of thing. So let's move on. We're here at our trine position now. This is when the moon is trine to the natal position of Jupiter, right? So in this case, you see that the moon is way up here at 85%. And well, in this case, the price is way down here, but it is at exactly, as you can see, the other trine harmonic, the 240 degree harmonic. You can see that that's the 240 degree harmonic, not only of the triangle, which began here at 51% and 91% over here, or sorry, that 91%, that's not right. 85%, which is the trine, is 307, right? And then over here, 67 degrees being 18%. Okay. So you can see that it's also here, if this is the actual position of the moon crossing through the zodiac, well then this is actually here the 120 degree harmonic of the moon. Right here, you can see that it's beginning 120 degrees into the cycle of the moon. So basically, this is the 120 degree harmonic, and this is the 240 degree harmonic of the actual moon. And you can see that the price is actually at this point during the trine. So when the moon was here, the price was exactly here, within the one box. Okay. It's kind of interesting. And then we can move on. Now the moon just crossed 0 degrees here. Look at that nice little jolt we get. Where does it go? Well, it heads back towards 0 degrees, okay? It topped out where? At the natal position of Jupiter. Perfectly. Okay? You can see also that it finds these supports and resistances at the natural resistances of the circle, 333, 666. That's the natural circle triangle. So starting here, 0 degrees, 120 degrees, 240 degrees, right? That Gantt triangle. So I think that you're getting a drift here, hopefully, that the idea is as you go through these cycles, the price will attempt to be in a relationship angularly to the kind of aspect that is occurring, the kind of transit when the moon is making a 120-degree transit. Well, so will the price try to be at that same 120-degree point. And you'll see once we get into optima and we start breaking down this ratio further and further, it will get more and more accurate. But let's move on a little bit here. Let's move into this time here, because truly that's where we saw the most connection. It was a little bit weaker back here in the market, right? So let's move into the next conjunction cycle here, starting right there at 0 degrees. That's the point in time when the moon crosses 0 degrees of the natal Jupiter cycle, right? So it's crossing this 187 degrees, right? That's where the moon is right there. In this level between 90 and 108, we have here the moon, the thicker white line, crossing 0 degrees right there and passing natal Jupiter right there. That's the conjunction again. And where is this price? Well, the price is right here, 120 degrees below. And just below that, you know, just as we enter into the conjunction, it basically tried to get a little bit further. Okay? Basically trying to get to what would be the halfway point, just like it did over here, right? Right? Look here. That was the last conjunction. Well, look over here. You've got another conjunction coming in at the same exact price level. Why is that? Well, these are related to price. It's the same aspect, the same transit. You're getting a similar price coming in. And yet again, as the market fluctuates and changes ratio, these relationships will no longer be valid. But within one cycle, you're seeing a return to the price, okay? Hitting that opposite point again of just over 0 degrees, right? $90. So this is, again, not just a grid structure that is really nice and follows the price nicely. If you look in really closely, you realize this is an hourly chart. So this is day to day. It took us a while to chart this out, but gee, you know, like if you did this a few days into the future, or sorry, a few weeks into the future, not that tough to keep up with it, right? It's an hourly chart. Once you get into a lot closer and a lot more cycles, it could be a lot more difficult to chart it manually. But this is kind of more than possible, right? And sticking to 1 or 2 cycles is not the worst idea. Jupiter, Saturn, a great idea, okay? We'll take a look at that next, but let's just pull this a little further, okay? We know that that was the conjunction moment, but we need the next round of moon positions, or the lunar lines here. You can just take all of these and copy them over, right? Then we can adjust them a little bit just so that they're perfect within this other cycle. Okay. You know that these middle lines, I'm not making them 100% perfect. You also know that, again, these are not perfect to being, you know, they're not including the weekends. Therefore, this is sort of an average of the moon's position across this area here. Okay. So I hope that somebody who requested that we look at Apple, I hope this is in depth enough for you, because this is pretty in depth right here. Okay. Pretty good, right? Could just take it up, move it up another level. Could just take this level here, copy it, set it within that, sorry, 108 to 126, perfectly within that range. Then another level, 126 to 144. There we go. Now we can set our moon lines pretty easily to the next level. Let's copy these, hit Control, start dragging them, hit Shift so they stay within this perfect geometry. Just put them up to the next level of 120 degrees, 0.333 and 0.666. Okay, and we've also got our boxes, our price boxes that we need to put into our levels of 360 degrees. So between 108 and 126, and the next level up. Now, hopefully you algorithm people out there or you programming people out there are coming up with a million ideas here. Obviously, all of this kind of stuff can be scripted. That's why I use Optima. It has this all kind of built in, but obviously people that know how to program and script will be doing this on their own and scripting this stuff on their own, no problem, right? You can easily lay down natal positions as percentages. All right. And again, you're looking for at this time. Let's pull in here. Let's get into the logic of it. Again, this is the 0 point here when Mars, or sorry, when this white line that we put here. This is when the moon crosses 0 degrees Aries. Another little correction, moving down to the actual position of the moon. That's a good reaction. That's like a reaction where the moon does something important. It crosses 0 degrees Aries, and then the price moves towards the moon. Kind of gets stuck here on the harmonic of the trine harmonic, but it does make it back to the moon's position, the actual position of the moon, and it uses it as support, as like a trend line. And of all of the planets, just so you know, I was looking at the sun the last time. Now we're looking at the moon just the same way. Well, that's basically the best trend line kind of planetary geometry that you could use. Heliocentric planets are pretty good too, but if you really want to see a price follow a trend line of a planet, an actual planetary trend line, well, like as you see, this actual line being followed by the price, the moon and the sun are the best ones. And that's why I say, technically the price every day, in and out, is the actual position of the moon. It's being forced back to it by natal position, natal transits. As it makes natal transits, the price is being attracted back to the position of the moon or the moon's harmonic. But you'll see that the reason it didn't hit the actual moon at these points will be because of a fluctuation in volume. And yes, we could use either the harmonic to sort of give us an alternate landing point, right? That's a good place for the price to cross here. Instead of crossing, right? This is the conjunction, this point here. This is the conjunction. Let's see, let's make sure that I'm being right. Yes, so the 1 is the conjunction here. Okay, let's do another here. Technically, we're looking for the price at this point because we are between 0 degrees, which begins at 108 in this case, and ends at 126 here, right? That's our 360 degree levels. Well, this is our conjunction moment, right? Our 0 degrees. That's when the moon crosses this point. But we expect again, we expect again for the price to be at this position right here. Now, as you can see, it was kind of in this wedge. And as it got towards this point, it did jet upwards. Where did it find some resistance? Right at the 120 degree harmonic. Very natural, right? Like, and it's working perfectly almost to the dollar to the day right there, right? So this is the way that we would deal with it. Easier, we get that bigger geometry and it fits within it. But you'll see that when we can zoom right in and see the multiple ratios as volume fluctuates, we can fluctuate our lines, move between 50 cents per degree or 5 cents per degree or 2 cents per degree or 1 cent per degree. You can see that the tiny little motions even within here, or getting right down to a 4-minute chart, you can define them with smaller levels of geometry of the moon. All right. Now, immediately though, you should realize that when you're dealing with something like this, well, technically, just like I showed you before, you could take a Ganfan. And if I place it right here at 0 degrees, when the moon crosses 0 degrees, this is going to be related to the speed of the moon doing 1 cycle. Let's take the Ganfan, sorry. put it right here at our 108 0-degree marker when the moon crosses 0 degrees, and I set it to the speed of the moon crossing through the zodiac. Here I set it perfectly to 108 and 126. And here we have a perfect lunar 1 by 1. And we'll look at where the high comes in on the 2 by 1. And essentially what this is telling you is another form of a way to read ratio. If this is set to an exact 1 by 1, which was, we know, 5 cents per degree, well, in this case, you know that this line here is moving at 10 cents per degree. And that means that during this period of time, we might find a better relationship right over here for this square of this exact position to actually work out with the price here at a higher ratio. And that's something that we're going to work into, okay? But I think immediately you realize, you know, this is the kind of geometry that you could use all the time. It requires nothing more than a few pivot points off of our ephemeris, barely any kind of price analysis other than what range are we sitting in. Okay, and I'm going to show you also how, again, you can kind of bring back your, I just read this question here. Joe, quickly, I think I might have let that go a little bit long there. Oh no, it just came in, okay, 815. But the price wouldn't be 360 degrees below that current price. Yes, so again, there's going to be things further to this, okay? So the way that we move between boxes, this is going to be something that we deal with, again, with our volume analysis. What's truly going on here when you get boxes that stop, you know, basically this level of 360 degrees from 108 to 126, when you see them, the price actually break through those moments, it's always going to be with a high level of volume. And I'm going to show you how you can monitor volume and to know when a break should occur, okay? And if we look here, we can see just on average, breaking above heavily here as we're breaking above our 360 degree mark. On average, the price being pretty consistent within one level, then a big spike in volume, even 4 times the average that it was going on at the time. And therefore we're up into a new box. How does that happen? Well, if there's a target involved here, maybe there's a square, maybe there's a trine, maybe there's a different cycle, okay? Well, at this moment, during this spike in volume, our ratio changes and fluctuates and actually opens the door for our price to move through. Maybe this is no longer 0 degrees when we're at something like $1 per degree, or in this case, it would be something like, instead of 5 cents, moving up to 10 cents per degree. Well, this 108 will no longer be a 360 degree point, and the target will actually blow right through. That's going to be our focus tomorrow. I'm going to show you how to deal with ratio. It's going to be complex a little bit, okay? It's not the simplest idea. This is where sort of the idea of the true Gann 1 by 1 comes into play. We're dealing with a conversion. It makes something simplistic out of this idea that we can convert degrees into price pretty easily. In this sense, it's at 5 cents per degree in this case, right? But when we start dealing with the idea of the 1 by 1 being broken and whether it shows strength or weakness, and in a sense showing you a new, when the market's broken to a new level and when it's going to settle down again. Well, that's all through volume reading, and that's all basically marking it up against a square, just like you would put the price into squares. In this case, we're putting into squares of 360 degrees. 360 degrees of price, and then 360 degrees of different kinds of time cycles. But it's still a 1 by 1 box, 360 degrees of price, and then in this case, 360 degrees of lunar degrees. So that's a 1 by 1 box related to lunar time. And so I know that, you know, maybe this isn't something that you could just immediately start trading off of, But I think that if you're somebody who already trades off of geometry and uses the ideas of support and resistance and uses the ideas of keeping, you know, trading safe with stops, etc., using stops that have a certain percentage built into them, percentage stop loss built into them, you can use your moon lines and you can use these targets as points, which you can see coming into the point, you know, into the future where a price level is going to be anticipatable. And if you don't see the trend line break and you see the price continue up, you know that the support is there and we can continue up at that exact same speed. If you see a huge influx in volume, in the sense of a great influx over the average that is currently going on in this market, well, then you're going to see an influx in ratio and you might break a level. And look, you can see that we got this another spike in volume. It's a signal over 0 degrees. And now we're over 0 degrees and it kind of finds that support. It wavers a little bit and finds that support. And you can see every single one of these is basically sort of jumping up by 120 degrees. We get to this 0 point and then it's here at 120 degrees beyond where it should be already. And now our next point, let's see, is this, so this is our 0 degree point. This is our conjunction. Now our trine, 0.333. Well, that should be coming in up here, right? This is our 1 by 1, and this is our 1 by 1. Well, we can see here 0.85, right? That's 307. Our trine was, where's our little note? 120 degrees, 0.85. So the target is here. The price is 120 degrees from there. Again, okay. So it's kind of like we're supposed to be here and then it moves up 120 degrees and then it moves over. There's your target at the next point, our next trine moment, which is 120 degrees from our last point, which is, again, all this is related to the moon, but look at how it relates to the price level too. And so the next target is here, beyond, into the next box, okay? This point here is 0 degrees R is moon again. So we might find that we can find a return back to the moon line here. Or if we're over 180 degrees of this box, which here, this is now we're in this box of 126 to 144. If we're in this box and we're about halfway over, maybe over the 50% mark, you know, our higher target becomes more likely. Sort of a balancing act there. So if we see that this price gets above natal Jupiter here at 51% of the box, 187 degrees, well, we know that we might see it actually move up to here as the moon crosses 0 degrees Aries, up to 144. Now, if we see that we're below natal Jupiter here, and the moon crosses 0 degrees Aries, well, that will be when we possibly think that the moon will, the price will move down here to the moon. If we find support here on the 120 degree harmonic, well, that's acceptable, and we would need to trade it that way. There would be ways, again, where we would probably expand or contract the geometry to find the exact square out. Or we can use this more general, bigger geometry and just use the logic of if we don't see a spike in volume, more than likely we're going to move down to this level here, or possibly to a proportionate level between here and there, between the price's current position and this point here, because it won't have enough volume, enough buying and selling to actually get even to the 5 cent per degree target. Possibly it will only make it to this line here, the 120 degree harmonic. So you either use the idea that you're watching for volume to sort of fluctuate and jump. When it gets to these sort of resistance points, you can call them. And if it's not at the price it should be at, well, it might make it about halfway there if you're not getting a full influx in volume. We're going to get more specific about that, but that's just a good way to look at it. If you don't see the accompanying volume to break through these lines where the average is not broken, well, then you're not going to see any kind of break of that line, and there should resolve back to that line you're expecting. Again, in this case, moon crossing 0 degrees, well, we would expect the price to be with the moon, or at least try to be there. Okay. Just like over here, where it kind of tried to be down there. And by the time it got there, the moon had already moved up. And so it kind of caught this low position and then moved up with the moon. It's using the moon as a trend line. Again, we're high here above the moon. It falls down towards the moon as it crosses 0 degrees, but it doesn't quite make it. We don't see a huge influx in volume. We get a lot of selling, but it doesn't quite sustain itself. It drops immediately off. So we're going to get into that a little bit more deeply. So I hope this made sense. I want to take like a 2-minute kind of breather here, because it's a lot of information. I know the moon is more intense. There's more charting. There's more involved. But I hope that you see, just looking back here now, let's get rid of this volume. Let's make it full screen. Here you have the entire, what would you call this golden bull run for Apple, right? This non-stop bull run that just hasn't been able to find a high. Well, I mean, it's perfectly defined by the moon at 5 cents per degree on an hourly. I mean, just perfectly. If you were just trading, say, one position of the moon, well, this center point here, which it kind of catches your support on, you could just be long with it. And, maybe you have a stops you out. Once you break back above that line, you're back in and you're continuing on. That's your 1 by 1, technically. No need to find a 45-degree line. No need to do anything special. In this case, we're just throwing it down. It's the moon's position, 5 cents per degree. And you think that, like, there's just such a, when it comes to astrology, everybody's looking for a very complex answer. And yes, this might be complex for people, but I think that hopefully you're catching the drift that this is a really simplistic approach. You're just drawing the circle and the artifacts along that circle onto the chart as geometry, and you're using your standard Gann tools. This is how or why these tools exist in this manner. Why we have boxes that we could break into percentages, because there's cycles that we're breaking up as well. Cycles of price and time. The boxes are little cycles, and we can represent. Let's just take a look here. Maybe they're not so clear to you, but this is one full cycle here. I'll take say a rectangle. 0 degrees already is there. Oh, there's my 0 degrees. Make it bright yellow, hey? Wow. Move it to the back. Oops, and to the back. Is that going to work? No? Okay. Well, anyway, I just wanted to show the actual one single cycle here. Let's knock off the transparency. Sorry, playing around here. Well, anyways, the rectangle is just showing you one single section. How come I cannot select that? Maybe I'll just go in here, get my rectangle. Okay, there we go. All right, just knock back. There we go. So to sort of recognize this square in here as something that is not related to price at all, but giving us exact, just like as if you were creating a structure of a Gann box from a high and a low, and it was coming in where the lines were crossing perfectly, and you saw that the crosses, where the lines intersect, the price is going through them perfectly. There might not be a perfect logic to it, but in the end it works. Well, in this case, you have the box. You have it well into the future, infinitely into the future, technically. If the price fluctuates to the point where it starts moving at a much faster rate per day, well, obviously we'd be moving at a faster rate, and then we'd be moving at maybe, rather than 5 cents per degree, we'd go to 10 cents per degree. Instead of 10 cents per degree, we go to 20 cents per degree. Okay. There was definitely a time very recently before the split where Apple was moving at a higher rate, probably rather than 5 cents per degree, it was more closer to 20 or 50 cents per degree. And the moon was just sort of fluctuating back and forth with the volume, essentially, the geometry in and out. So from here, I'm going to move into Optima, and I'm going to show a contrasting cycle between Jupiter and Saturn, a natal transit of the moon to natal Jupiter, and the transit of the moon to natal Saturn. I'm going to show you on Bitcoin. And then I'm going to quickly show you also some of the moon lines on a stock like Apple. Maybe I'll do it right now, actually, just right after this, and then I'll move to Bitcoin. Because when you draw these moon lines on stocks, you get something a little bit different than what you see here. You get a more exact representation, but I'm sure you'll see that that exact representation is a little bit, well, you know, harder to look at anyways. It's not as neat looking as this, okay? So let's pull up Optima here. Oops. And actually, just really quickly, I'll pull up Apple again. And I'll pull up the hourly, 60 minutes. Okay. Oops. There we go, auto. Huh. Okay, so it was keeping, oh wow, okay, this hasn't adjusted yet. So it has its, I'm sure that this feed will get corrected by next week and it'll have the same kind of information that we have in TradingView. But it doesn't really matter because the idea that I'm just trying to show you is when we take our Gann planetary line tool in Optima, right? If I were to set it here, like I said, it was rather than 5 cents per degree, maybe let's try 50 cents per degree. Oops, 0.5. And let's try the moon. Okay. Right. So there's the moon at 50 cents per degree. You could see that recently in this highest point, probably it was working at something like that, right? Let me take off that, all that describe. Can't get rid of my crosshair here. Sorry, just playing around here and trying to get, okay, my magnet, my crosshair, okay. Things weren't working right there. But anyways, the idea is this, that, you know, you can see the moon on this hourly chart at 50 cents per degree. Maybe we even move down to 20 cents, like I had said. Okay, you can see perfect trend line there. And, you know, the recent stock split, that's why the settings are a little bit different here that we're using. We are in summer, so it's -4 GMT. And we could also see, like we did, the 120-degree harmonics of the moon, so we can pull up the trines. Right. Let's make those stippled just like we did. Make them dotted, kind of. So you can see you've got here your thicker white line. That's the actual moon. Let me make that thicker. And you've got this price just following it. Now, what is this little quiver that you see in the line? And what are all these little imperfections that you see? Well, if we pull up our crosshair, we get rid of all those squares that you see show data. There we go. Crosshair. If we pull our date here, you can see that that's Friday, Monday. So that's our weekend, and you can see that little bend. So you can see that my chart from TradingView is not taking into account this little bend. I'm getting basically an average of the lunar cycle, but the lunar cycle includes weekends. Now, if you're dealing with Bitcoin, you know that Bitcoin is a 7-day, 24-hour-a-day cycle, or a 24-hour-a-day market. And so if I were to pull up an hourly chart with Bitcoin and lay down these lines, well, it's going to be straight lines. In this case with Bitcoin, let's look at our Gann planetary lines. These are going to be at 50 cents per degree. You can see that straight line there. That is the moon. No imperfections. 24/7 market. Okay. Now you can see that the bends happen into the future though. And that's because Optima and many other marketing or markets programs, any kind of analyst programs, they have this trouble with projecting into the future the amount of days of the market, how many hours into the future. It all depends on how you have your settings of your market set up, but also Optima will not project weekends into the future. TradingView has a lot of trouble keeping track. If you start counting into the future, the lines will definitely move if you have them set. Coordinates flip and change as the markets fluctuate in the holidays, the amount of days per week. By chance, whether there's a day off here and there, this kind of thing is not accounted for perfectly into the future with many kinds of softwares. Okay, so if you start drawing all those different cycles like we did with the boxes, well, you're going to have to keep adjusting them, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. But with Bitcoin, you can see, especially when you kind of look back, before there was a weekend or anything that came in through, you can see Sunday here. This is price on Sunday, on Saturday. Okay, so you're getting that 24-hour straight mood line, and basically you can see, if I kind of zoom in here, you can see the point here. That's when the moon crossed 0 degrees. The price is there, and you have this point here. The market is going to cross, or the moon is going to cross 360 degrees here, just like we had on September 3rd, right? So same information. With Bitcoin, you get that perfect straight line, but on Apple, when you really draw that moon out where you only have the hours of the market that are happening, you get this jagged line. And well, it's a little bit tough to deal with, let's say. You don't get these perfect geometric square outs like you do with Bitcoin. You get this sort of wonkiness that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with the opening and closing of the day. You have to deal with possibly after hours, after market hours, coming in at 4 a.m. Often you'll have American stocks 4 a.m. Or also into 8 p.m. the night before. Okay, and that always is a little bit weird. The volume is always a little bit weird at that time. Commonly, lunar transits will still work out on that aftermarket's hours, but the volume is much lower. Therefore, the logic between using our volume and using it to set our geometry becomes a little bit more difficult. But let's move over back to Bitcoin, because number one, it's a popular market. It's a great place to use the moon. There's a lot of moon rhetoric around Bitcoin already, and I think that's a good sign. So from here, immediately you realize there's a ton more aspects, right? What did we have? We had just the trines. We were working with just the quintiles, right? Now we're working with all of them. Let's see that symbol here, right? We've got all of them here. Basically, if I look in here into my settings for my transits, I've got my conjunction, my semi-sextile, and you can see them all here. Semi-sextile is here, yeah, 30 degrees, okay. Semi-square, 45 degrees. All of them are listed, okay. And all that's doing is pointing it out to me. But let's reproduce what we kind of were working with just now, okay. This is too many to begin with, I guess. So let's just take first of all, we'll take out just one cycle. And so this is the moon transiting natal Jupiter, just like we had with Apple, okay. This would be a different triangle, or sorry, a different triangle on the circle in this case, because the natal position of Jupiter is different for Apple. The natal date for Bitcoin is the Genesis block, 1/3/2009, January 3rd, 2009, 6:15 p.m. We need the time because we're going to be using the moon, okay? And again, we're using a piece of software now to do a lot of what we were doing in TradingView with all those boxes pretty much manually. And rather than having to have a box in every section, we're basically going to have a tool that just sort of denotes the moment to us when something might be occurring. Okay. So in this case, I've got here all of the aspects, but let's just look at the conjunction and the trines, just like we were looking at. Okay. Because the conjunction shows you the 0 degree point and the trines give you the two 120 degree points. So you need to see both of them. the triangle is showing you, the triangle that I drew here for Apple, it's showing you the conjunction as well, right? So we need to see that as well. So I've got my two trines and the conjunction there, right? So what's that doing for me? That's taking the position of the moon, and when it crosses a particular degree, it's denoting it to me. What are those degrees? Well, let's take a look at our ephemeris for Apple. I don't need to look at the ephemeris like I do now that I'm in Optima, right? On that manual ephemeris. I could just take my Running Man here. If I right click on the chart, or I could go to new, I can go to Astro ephemeris, or I could right click, Running Man, open for date ephemeris. That's going to open an ephemeris for me. And you can see I've already got one here, so I'll just close that up. Oops. Now, got a lot of special things on here, but let's just simplify what you see. We're going to get into this whole setup a lot more tomorrow. It's going to get a little more complex, a little more ideas put into it. We're going to get rid of these, okay? These fixed points are important, but for now they're not important. All we see is the sun and the moon, all right? All we really need is the moon, right? But we also need, well, a point in time, and we need that natal date specified to us, and we need the position of Jupiter. So let's see here. What's a good way to do this? I think let's just take our ephemeris, and I will take it and clone it. And I'll just put it into its own window so we have this separate that we can refer back to. And this will be the natal ephemeris, okay? I like for ephemeris, the 90 degrees on the bottom and 0 degrees on the left, right? March 21st. 90 degrees down there, okay? It's just your regular ephemeris, just like we had before. There's your moon and your sun, and it's set to 9/1, but what we want to do is go back in time. So let's go back to 2009, and January 3rd, 6:15 p.m. Oops, where am I going? Now, this is only important for the position of the moon, 6:15 p.m., mostly, and the sun, I suppose, if you want to be exact about things. But let's also get Jupiter in there, because we want the position of Jupiter, 299 degrees, right? Let's also get Saturn, 171 degrees. So you can see those positions right there. Jupiter was here on the date of birth of Bitcoin, the Genesis block. Okay. We can go through natal dates. If you have trouble with that, let me know. We can find the natal date for your market. Okay. Let's not discuss why this date is too important. Just generally with Bitcoin technology, the Genesis block is a very important date, a very first point of origin. Okay. And so we've got here Jupiter and Saturn, 299 and 171. So basically, if we pulled this logic here back to our chart, right? What we're seeing when we see something like this being shown to us, this means the moon conjunct natal Jupiter. Natal Jupiter is set to the natal date. And that means that the moon on this day should be crossing 299 degrees. Now we can confirm that many different ways, but let's just take a look here. If I take my show data values here, I show all the different astro positions of that day. And if I put it there to the date of the conjunction, and I look at the moon, I can see it's just about there at 300 degrees. There's 299 is right there. Okay, so it's within these few hours that it occurs. Let's make sure that it's set to the right time zone, 0, and let's make sure that this is also set to the right GMT. Yeah, GMT 0. So that's universal time, or UTC time, or GMT time. All right. So 299, 171. So we know that on that day, at that time, oh, there we go. That's why. So our astro positions on our data values are not changed to GMT proper, GMT 0. Okay. So now we should see when we align our cursor to that point, I should see this Jupiter at 299 exactly. Or sorry, the moon at 299 exactly. And you can see there in that list of stuff above my cursors, The moon is at 299 at that moment of natal Jupiter. And so we could also prove it by putting down our Gann intervals. Let's put down Gann intervals this time at 50 cents per degree. Or actually, let's do $1 per degree. Okay, a little bigger. Let's just get rid of this. All right. Notice I have these set up, right? I'm going to fluctuate. I'm not going to just look at $1 per degree. It's not always going to be perfect that way. But you could see that $1 per degree on an hourly chart for Bitcoin, pretty great levels, pretty good division, good channels, right? And now if it will work out with that same logic where it's crossing that point in time at that right price, right? Well, let's see if we can get that. In this case, instead of having to do all those levels of price manually, well, look, I've got my levels of 360 degrees manually priced at $1 per degree, which means this is 360 degrees, that's $360 levels, right? Here you are at about 11.2 there, $360 above, about 11.5, right? Makes sense, about $360. If you took the exact numbers, you'd find it's exactly. You can see that there is a good connection to these levels, just like with Apple. But you notice with Apple, you're not getting all those crazy spikes, not as much anyways. Let's just quickly go back to that Apple chart just to see the smoothness of the way that this trend line kind of holds things a little bit better. Oops, where's our Apple chart? Here we go, right? That's a lot less violent spiking downwards. Bitcoin is just known for that kind of thing. This is the same kind of chart, but you know, maybe we need to see then the level of geometry above, and you'll see that eventually you might get too spread out. Zoom out a little bit, but $2 per degree, well, basically the biggest moves perfectly being contained within there. And so that's a good sign to you that you can start to use those multi-levels, those levels of geometry work out for you. And then you have to find if the logic is also working with the square outs. But knowing this, that you can experiment in Optima, you don't just have to stick to $1 per degree or $2 per degree with your box, or you don't have to cumbersomely go through building an entire box. Well, I mean, this is pretty simple, right? I've got these positions. That's the actual position. Let's see the moon. Look at our position of price here, 315 degrees, this line here. Well, just below there, there's the moon. Well, the moon is at about 299 degrees at that exact hour, right? Well, this is an hourly chart. So that means that we're seeing also in price, the moon at 299 degrees at that exact moment, a secondary confirmation of that same thing. Right. And again, this is at $2 per degree. If we do it at $1 per degree, it'll still be there, right? We'll see it at $2 per degree, $1 per degree, doesn't matter. You can see that at $1 per degree at this moment, the price at the conjunction gets back to the moon. And that's something I want you to kind of start to focus on. In the best case scenario, when you can fluctuate your geometry constantly, well, the target at the moment of the aspect or transit is the moon itself. Think about the aspect language that we're using, moon, transit, natal Jupiter. Sorry, I'm just trying to adjust my windows here. But think about that, you know, this is the moon conjunct to natal Jupiter. So the moon moving through the price and hitting the degree of natal Jupiter. But this is the moon transiting a position of price, which we could also translate as a perfect line as well, right? I can come in here and, you know, just like I had all of those positions in my boxes mapped out, well, what if I took my degrees and I took all of this tool here and I started to add all of the positions of natal Jupiter rather than putting in the percentages? This time I can just enter the degree. So with Apple, natal Jupiter was 187. So if I wanted to see the position and price of natal Jupiter, I would put it in 187. But we know for Bitcoin, it's at 299. So I can just actually have these tools all preset and built. I can open up my position of natal Jupiter. Let's look at it here, 299 degrees. You can see it set that. And what's the actual ratio? Well, we need to see it at the same ratio. So let's set it to $1 per degree, because that's what we're looking at, $1 per degree and 299 degrees. And let's see, take a look. And you can see that the crossing right there That's what we're looking for, this blue line, to cross the moon at that exact moment of the conjunction. And what we're looking for is also for the price to be there. And of course it is. All right. And that's what we're looking for. So let's go through a little bit further. If this is the same setup that we were looking at with Apple, well, look, this is our trine. This is our first trine. So that means that the moon has traveled 120 degrees from this position. And it's now at the position of 120 degrees from natal Jupiter. Okay. If we were to take our ephemeris, oops, sorry. If we were to take our ephemeris here, right, we have our ephemeris. And let's just, sorry, let's make it much more visible. There we go. Okay. Sorry, getting a little bit of flying around here. So let's take our fixed points, and I'm going to add 299 degrees, which is natal Jupiter. I've got these other places here. Let's ignore them for now. 299, natal Jupiter. Let's make it blue, just like our line. Okay, and I can call it literally a natal Jupiter on there, or BTC Jupiter. That's what I would usually call it, BTC Jup. Okay, you pick the color, and let's take away all those lines except for Jupiter position. And there it is on the circle. And now let's see our trines aspects, just the trines. And let's pull it here. What I can do, if I'm in Optima, I can set my ephemeris to be a certain color. If I set that color on my chart as well. And now double click on the chart. On this day, I've got a stick here, or a line that allows me to pull the ephemeris in date. Now, whatever position this yellow line is, this is the position that we are in time on this ephemeris. Well, in time in general, and then you're seeing the planet's positions move towards where they're going by moving this line, right? All the way around. All right, so at this point here, we should find at that exact moment, check it out, at the trine, we got a line there telling us that it's 120 degrees apart. Now, take a look. Where is the price? The price is on the moon. At this moment, the moon is transiting natal Jupiter's 120 degree harmonic. So that means the moon is 120 degrees from natal Jupiter. Where is the price? It has hit this actual position of the moon at that exact moment, which means the price is here at this exact moment. I hope that kind of, it's got a ring with you, you know, this is exactly what we're doing. Hopefully it's a little more visible in this software. This is what I was doing on the Apple software, right? Or sorry, on the Apple chart in the other software. But seeing it this way is maybe a little more clear. 299 degrees, natal Jupiter. Moon moves 120 degrees from there. At that day, at that time, at that hour, the price is there. And now let's move on. 240 degrees. Here's the moon coming up, crossing where? 240 degrees. So let's move our cursor here and move it all the way around to our next trine, which, yeah, you should see the moon making its 120 degree harmonic to natal Bitcoin Jupiter. But this is now the 240th degree of this cycle, coming back around 120 degrees from the end. And of course, what happens? It's here at natal Jupiter, the price, and it falls to the moon. It's here on the circle, and it falls to the moon. There's other things going on. And where does it fall? Well, it falls all the way 360 degrees around and lands on natal Jupiter again. So it's basically doing an entire circle and making an entire triangle in a sense. Okay. Now, what happened here as well? Fluctuation in volume. What could have happened that made it so that we did fall and cross 0 degrees? Well, what did I say before? a fluctuation in volume will allow us to break through the geometry of 360 degrees. Let's take a look here. I've got the ability, because I'm in Optima, I'm just going to jump doubling in volume. If you notice here, I'm at 100% of my Fibonacci retracement. I'll show you how to set up the structure in here, but this percentage is very important for this time frame. This percentage of 100% here, that's set to basically this level of 100. Well, look at the volume at least doubles on average, at least doubles. We deal with numbers when we're dealing with ratio like $1 per degree, $2 per degree, maybe $4 per degree, then $5. Then we go back up and we go up another level up to maybe $10 per degree. So it's just another level of times 10, right? So we're never using every single ratio. We round them up, $1 per degree, $2 per degree. So if this has jumped in value, or sorry, in volume, well, from here, we can see basically at this moment, the price wants to break through this geometry of the moon and move to the next level. And well, let's just take a look at our $2 per degree. Let's make sure our Jupiter line also changes to $2 per degree. And look at that. The price is at the moon, at the aspect, and falls to natal Jupiter this time, right through 360 degrees and taps it and bounces. What did it do on the circle? In this case, at $2 per degree, the price is here, sitting at the moon, trapped in a sense. Once the actual aspect comes in, it's below the moon. So it's kind of down here, right? Maybe about where the sun is, right? Little clue there. Well, what happens? It falls around the circle and hits natal Jupiter again, perfectly. And just like with our positions of our boxes, with our trine positions, we could also put trine positions with price. So I can look at my natal positions of Jupiter of 299 degrees. But I can also see the trine position, which is at 59 degrees, which is 299 plus 120. And we know that this is the 240 degree, right, of the Jupiter cycle. So that's 179, 299 plus 120 goes around the circle to 0 degrees. Oh, sorry, this is backwards ephemeris, always gonna piss off the the true astrologers out there, no question, makes sense. Okay. And so the price falls down through, but it's up here, the price up at the moon, right? And we know that that's also the 240 degree position of the cycle, right? Whoops. Losing control again a little bit here. Okay, so there's the 120 degree marker. It'll be tight there for some reason. Maybe my orb is set very small. That's what it is. Set my orb to 2 degrees. Now it'll tell me when I'm within 2 degrees of that aspect. And there you go. So we can see basically the price is exactly at the moon, okay, which is basically at exactly 180 degrees. So that's another clue there that at this point during this volume influx, well, you know, the moon crossed 180 degrees, which is also one of those moments where the moon is doing something important. Yes, it was also trying to the Jupiter's natal position, but it was also crossing 180 degrees and the price was there exactly. Now it falls, right? And let's also get that other harmonic, 299 degrees of natal Jupiter plus 120, we get to 59 degrees down here, right? Natal Jupiter, 59 degrees over here, and then 240 degrees over here. So let's show that, and you can see the crossing right there. So not only is there that 180 degree crossing of the moon in the actual ephemeris, but also that's the actual price of natal Jupiter's 240th degree, which we are in the 240th degree of natal Jupiter's cycle, of the lunar cycle transiting natal Jupiter. price and time. So it's not just structures of lines, it's price and time harmonics. It's literally the price cannot escape this structure set from 2009 to the hour in this position, and I'll show you tomorrow how we can get down to a 4-minute chart. But the idea is always that from some position relatable to the natal transit, that the price either is at the moon and then moves to the natal position, or it's at the natal position and moves to the moon. And that's your logic. It's quite simplistic. The issue is that fluctuation of ratio occurs and things can get out of position in a sense that they might not click perfectly at that moment because volume fluctuated. And so we need to keep an eye on volume. We keep an eye on volume in the sense of breaking it down into proportions relatable to the time frame we're on. And we'll do that a little bit, actually quite a bit tomorrow. Okay. So let's take a look now at the same exact process that we just did, but let's integrate now another planet, because I know that you realize, I hope that you realize that in TradingView, you could have easily created this. This is just those 360-degree levels of price. In this case, it's at a different level. It's at $1 per degree or $2 per degree in this case, right? And you can preset them up in your TradingView at these different levels. And then you can move them around and build them into the future as the price goes there, right? But with Optima, I just set those settings and it's there forever. The moon's position is set forever. So it doesn't have to do any kind of, I don't have to do any special charting beyond this, right? So now let's take we can put it into hyperspeed. Let's just start laying more cycles. Obviously, there's more cycles within this. This is not just the trine cycles. We could look at the quintiles like we did. We could look at the quintiles, the squares. Here's our squares and our trines. Here we have a square. Where does it do? It falls back down to the moon. Here we have a trine, a trine on the moon here. Here we have a square. Well, it's not quite there. It's sort of here on this trine line. Well, what happened to the market there? Look at that. Look at the volume. Total collapse, even down to the 0.5 level on the actual volume here. So that means here, what happens if I were to look at a smaller geometry? What does $1 per degree look like? Just get rid of those Jupiter lines. $1 per degree. Where's the moon? Well, look at that. As we get to that aspect, what happens? It moves right to the moon. Guys, this is it, right? I hope that you're seeing this. The idea is that as a natal transit occurs, well, the price cannot help but be at the event. Where is that event? The event takes place at the moon's position in price. This is why every day you can look towards the position of the moon to find the actual price, where it will be. When will it be at that moon? Well, it will be there during a major natal transit. And we could map them manually like I was doing. And now we can kind of go a little crazy in Optima and see them all, right? Let's look at, now we have our Jupiter. Well, let's look at our Saturn. There's a lot of transits, but just let's look at the big ones for now. Let's look at just the trines, just the squares. You could look at the quintiles if you'd like. Well, I'll show you a method of I use quintiles in a particular way with the moon and the sun, and then I move towards looking towards these aspects of the major aspects, the trines and conjunctions and squares and oppositions. But you can see again, you have the moon transiting the natal position of natal Saturn in this case. You know natal Saturn is 171 degrees. We already looked at it. And you can see here, it's set to the same date. Well, first of all, I'm sure you're noticing immediately, I hope you're noticing, look at the turns that the moon transits create. It's not about the lunar aspect of the day. It's about the lunar natal transit to the particular market you trade. The vibration of the market is held within the natal date in a sense. The market springs off from there and the vibration occurs infinitely for the market. So we look towards possibly 1 ratio that works out quite a bit, which is great. But in the biggest moments, you'll see it working out on maybe double that 1 ratio. And look at that. Your trine coming in perfectly on the high at $2 per degree, where you have this gigantic, well, gigantic is relative, a big fluctuation in volume here, breaking the 20% level. That's what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for the level of 20% to be broken for myself to go to $2 per degree. And that's sort of a key little thing that I start to work with. You can see that eventually we broke down from basically where? The 50% mark. What would that be? $5 per degree. And you can see that this chart has not really ventured in, and maybe just in spikes, but on average, it has barely make it, maybe just in this gigantic spike, it had a $5 per degree mark. But basically throughout this time, we were sitting within $1 to $2 per degree, finding resistance basically at $5 per degree. And that's what these numbers that you see here. And I'm going to show you how to do that tomorrow. But immediately you realize that if you've got a map like this, where you can fluctuate your volume, as you move towards it, you'll get the signal. Is it $1 per degree? Oh, no, it's $2 per degree. Okay. And then you go there. And so the classic ideas of, yes, in some sense, Saturn transits are negative in a sense. They're bearish. Jupiter transits positive. You can use that logic here. But it doesn't mean that every time it's going to work. In a sense, this is a square with Jupiter here. You get a negative movement, but into it is quite positive. So that always bothered me a little bit. It's hard to break down that dichotomy. Is it bullish going in or bearish going out? But truly, it doesn't matter because the idea is here. At this moment, as we get this square, the market is saying, no, we need to be at the moon. And where does the market go? To the moon. I mean, almost perfectly, right? It bounces off of it. Violent, but it worked. Then we come here, we get a trine here again. Well, where does it go? The moon. This white line again. And once the market starts to fluctuate and sink down here, you might be working with a smaller ratio, maybe $1 per degree, working out here. As the market kind of sort of shuts down for a little bit there. Maybe it's the middle of the night, maybe it's the weekend. Okay. What I hope is that you're getting the idea is that you have literal price targets for these moments. The price target, though, is not complex, especially once you can draw the moon. Well, the target is the moon. Just like if you were using the planets, well, the target would be the planet. But maybe the timing is a little bit more difficult to see. It's a little bit longer winded. It happens over a course of a couple of days or weeks. But in this case, it's immediate. A couple of hours. The price is here at the moon. It falls where? To the moon. If it was going to get a fluctuation in volume, maybe we jump to the next level. Where did it go? In this fluctuation above 20%, well, it fell to the $2 per degree moon perfectly. This is the Saturn opposition. Doesn't matter about the opposition, but realize that this point is also, if I take my Saturn position of 171 degrees and I add 180 degrees, I will get 351. 171 plus 180 is 351. And if I take that level, that price level, make sure it's also at $2 per degree here. I show that line. Let's take a look at my opposition. Well, look at that. You can see that the crossing right there, that price level, the first bar that falls, it falls to that almost exact price level, nearly to the penny. Okay. So as you can see, that bearish movement falling downwards and also then moving down right to the moon. It spikes, it's Bitcoin, it's got this fluctuation problem. It jumps. Look at the actual volume. Look at it spiking really high here. I'm not sure what that white line is. The white line is not what I'm looking at here, but the actual volume jumping up to about 75% here of my box, nearly up to the 1, right? Okay. So these spikes, they in a sense, they fluctuate to the point where if you were to expand this planetary geometry just beyond to the actual volume that comes, you might find that you might be able to catch this exact number. But look, also where it falls is just a perfect geometric point of 270 degrees in price and bounces. Exact sort of 90-degree movement from 0 degrees and then finding support above 0 degrees. So that's the idea, you know. Let's pull up our natal position of Saturn at 360-degree position of Saturn, meaning our natal position, the actual 171 degrees at $2 per degree. There's our conjunction right there, and there's our position of natal Saturn, and that's the moon crossing through. We know that we also had that Jupiter trine there, right? But at $2 per degree, we had this fluctuation, but also, you know, this little dip in volume might maybe convince me that at this moment that even though it's squaring out here, it's not going to also then fly above and get up to some other higher level. It might be trapped within this level. Let's look at our $1 per degree. Let's look at this. There's our natal Saturn, and look at that. It finds this resistance at 0 degrees and falls down to the moon. And that's our position. If it was above 0 degrees here, or 360 degrees, you would suggest maybe that it's going up to this level. But instead it doesn't, it falls and finds its way down to this level. But also we get another fluctuation in volume. So the $2 per degree is playing out quite a bit here, okay? And so if you were somebody that traded $2 per degree only, you might find that that works out quite a bit for you. And as long as you kind of keep an eye on maybe the proportions of your $2 per degree, you're realizing that half of this proportion is really the $1 per degree targets. So realistically, we can look at our $2 per degree target. And then as volume dips, we can know that, oh, well, it's not going to make it all the way down to our next lower level moon and break through our 360-degree level. No, it's going to find its resistance there because we're not getting that complementary volume increase. Or we're not falling all the way there because we're falling to that about halfway point, which would be more relatable to the lower ratio of $1 per degree or wherever you're sitting in price. So I hope this made sense. I hope this wasn't too much. It was a good leap from our last class. Tomorrow, we're going to get further into reading this kind of information, right? We're going to get further into reading this particular information on tighter timeframes, on multiple timeframes, maybe seeing this ratio information coming in on a daily, and then seeing how it kind of compares to the information that's coming in on the lower timeframes, like the 1 hour, or even like the 4 minute. I'll show you. Like, this is what my 4 minute will look like. I've got it here. And when we get to 4 minute, we get in a lot closer, okay? But again, I'm working with $1 per degree, but you can see that in this case, I start to go down even further, down to 20 cents per degree. And I've got every single transit of every single natal transit of every single natal planet, okay? So in this case, this one tool is set to natal Neptune, the moon transiting natal Neptune, and every single one of the aspects that it makes. Why? Because during each one of those aspects, we should anticipate it moving towards the moon. But as we get tighter and tighter, we'll realize that volume fluctuates more and more on these tighter and tighter timeframes. And well, maybe 0.5 during this period of time was not good enough, or $1 per degree, or not even 50 cents per degree, but maybe 20 cents per degree. And you can see perfectly how at each one of these aspects or transits, you're getting a square out with the moon. I know that it gets very tight. I think I'm a little bit, yeah, there we go. There we go. So each one of these moments that the moon makes a transit, it is crossing the moon line. And yeah, it gets a little bit difficult. This is a 4 minute chart. You know, dealing with a 4 minute chart is not simplistic, but I think you're realizing what you're ending up with is literal price time targets. So if I'm here this day and I'm trading and I'm short, the moon down here is the next target unless I see a fluctuation in volume. And if I do, I move up to my next level, and maybe my lower level is my target. So by the time we get over here, and we see these fluctuations in volume moving back up, we start to see the movement back to the moon line at a higher ratio of, rather than 20 cents per degree, at 50 cents per degree. And so this is really easy in Optima, but also if you were pre-prepared in TradingView, I think that you could easily set up a couple of ratios for a couple of time frames, and that's basically all you would need. But the volume reading and how you break down volume for the different time frames is going to be important. You notice here, look at how I'm now on a 4-minute chart, I'm breaking it up into this ratio of 6.6. So this level of 6.6, I guess, million shares, okay? So basically this level of volume of 6.6, it's a ratio relatable to 4 minutes, okay? So I'm going to show you this list of the way that you would break down each time frame, and it will help you kind of zoom in. If you don't want to deal with just one cycle and you want to trade basically a couple times a day, you could zoom right in and get right in on these types of levels. Let's make sure that everything we're looking at here is 0.5, price degree intervals 0.5. Now, if you notice here, my price degree intervals here, they are special degrees, okay? Those are my squares and my trines of price levels, just of the regular ephemeris, just like I would do with when I was trying to lay my moon on in TradingView, right? I put these lines down, the 0.333 and the 666, that's the 120 and the 240. And so, you know, you can basically preset a whole bunch of these at different ratios, and you just sort of flick through as you need them. As you see the fluctuation in volume occur, you move down to a different level of ratio. And this is day to day, literally. So, you know, one day to the next day, it's going to be different, okay? The 4-minute chart, literally, you know, one day you're going to have a spike in volume that's so crazy different than anything that's relatable to the 4-minute chart. And that's because it's relatable to something more relatable to the higher time frames. But you'll still see that connection. Look at the high coming in perfectly there. Okay. Kind of ventures off here. When does it do that? If ventures off in volume. And you can see that the lower level geometry is there. Maybe you want to go down to a 1-minute chart if you're looking at all of this information. It's more than possible. And why is this good for leverage trading? Why is this good for high leverage if you're dealing with 10x, 20x? Well, look at these stops that you have. Look at these places for putting buys and sells and you know, applying a logic of, well, if the market is here, we don't, and my next target is the lower moon line, well, we can put a stop above the higher moon line. If I'm wrong, I'm out at the moon line, and it's very safe. So the trading logic will also go through a little bit tomorrow, okay? Dealing with percentages, dealing with stop losses. But hopefully you realize also that I took the moon and I did what I did with it, you know, the other day as well with the planets. It's the same process, but we're in close. We're dealing with multiple ratios. We're reading volume. It's all a much more complete process here, okay? And, you know, when we get beyond this point and we start dealing with the square of 9, it's going to help you even understand a little bit more why, you know, like the question that came in, how do we know which level of 360 degrees something is moving towards? Well, the square of 9 will help us find that information a little bit easier. It will help us know when price should move to a new level and when it might start fluctuating at a faster rate. It gives us that information as well. If you know anything about the square of 9, that already might make sense to you completely. If not, well, that's basically what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at how the planets move through the square and kind of define price movement for us, just the same way as the moon crossing through the ephemeris. Well, the planets crossing through the ephemeris and passing natal positions and passing important degrees of the circle. Okay. But I think that when you see this kind of information laid out this way and you sort of zoom out, I think that you see the moon creates these wonderful channels, just like we did with the Apple chart now. I'm just sort of concluding here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, right? You can even see the bigger geometry when we zoom out a little bit. Okay. I've got some fib retracements there that I'm going to use just to sort of define the moments between the aspects. Okay. But also I'm going to use a relationship of the sun and the moon. Here I've actually got the sun and the moon. Now, if I take my extraplanetary lines and I've got here, not just the moon, but also the sun. Let's make that a little thicker so you could see it. Okay. This is $1 per degree. I'm sure that you can see, well, where's this alternative kind of support and resistance coming from? We're getting a good connection to not only the moon and its angular movement, its speed, but also we're getting some good support and resistance from the circle, the 0 degrees of the circle, and, well, the sun itself. Okay. And the sun is going through the same process of aspecting positions, aspecting the moon, going through its phases of the year, its GAN seasonal dates, going through its equinox and solstice cycle, just like the moon is going through its full moon and new moon cycle. But basically, they're just moving through the ephemeris 360 degrees. It's the same information. How you view it, though, well, if you're able to draw it, I think that you can see the idea here is that by drawing it, we get a lot of information. We get price information much more easily available. Yes, if you were sharp, I think you'll realize that if you knew how to convert price very easily, then you don't need a chart like this. You could technically just look at the ephemeris and you'll know where the 360 degrees in price means. If our price is 11.9, you would know that at $1 per degree, about here is a 360 degree mark. You would know the level of 360 degrees that it's sitting within, and therefore you would know the position of the moon, the position of Mars, or whatever other planet you'd like, Jupiter, and you would be able to apply a price level immediately to this just by looking at the circle. Well, and this is what a GAN tool like the Square of 9 or the Wheel 24 is sort of a specialized version of this where the geometry gets folded up or specially placed. But just the standard 360 circle gives us all of this information when we put the planets down. And you can see, yes, the planet that the price is mostly at constantly is the moon day to day. And where does it find movement towards? A lot of times towards the sun. And yeah, it fluctuates enough that it gets a little bit tight to the point where, well, 20 cents per degree, it's just almost blinding, right? But when you get right in there, if you were even on a 1-minute chart, you would find it's that the moments the actual transit occurs that we're at the moon's position. And so even at 20 cents per degree, you're dealing with a price range, which is, down here, you're at 11.7. If you were dealing with high leverage trading, this is a range that could be easily, making you a lot of money back and forth. As the price moves up towards the next level, we move down towards, let's make sure all of our lines are proper here. Oh, I moved down to 10 cents, 20 cents. I thought that looked a little strange. There we go. Okay. So as we move up towards 180 degrees, our next transit, which is over here, well, we basically get the idea that the aspect, or the transit's price is basically the position of the moon, right? This is natal Saturn, and this is a semi-square. No, semi sextile. No, this is quincunx. Sorry, getting my symbols mixed up. Okay, that's our 150 degree harmonic. Quincunx, our 150 degree transit. Okay. And so we could look here. We can actually go and find our natal position of Saturn, and we can find our 150 degree is a 30 degree harmonic technically. Okay, so if I just take all these levels and I added 171, and if I take that and I add 150 degrees, let's just add that in front of you. 171 plus 150, 321. So let's look at our Saturn's 30 degree harmonics, 321. And you can see I've specified it to myself because it's 150 degrees, 321. And so let's take it here and make sure that our 30 degree transits are, sorry, our 30 degree positions of natal Saturn are set to 20 cents, just like we have our settings here, 20 cents, right? And there's our orange line, and you can see the crossing of the price at that exact moment. That's our natal position of Saturn, 150 degrees from natal Saturn. So if at this moment, our trading rationale would be that up here, as we approach 180 degrees, maybe we pull out our time measurement tool, we put it between the two transits. And as we approach the midpoint, we wonder to ourselves, well, if the target is here, if we are if we are below 180 degrees, the target is here. So I can be short into this point, and my stops can be over 180 degrees. Simple as that. And you can see that you actually got a secondary opportunity right at that moment. At the moment, it fluctuated upwards and then fell back down just perfectly. So there's often a fast market, so lots of little opportunities that come your way. I'm sure that people that script, well, this might be sending off some major ideas for you. But also I think that you realize putting this into an hourly, looking at the bigger cycles, I think it's more human, and you can trade this by hand a little bit easier. But a 4-minute chart, you know, it's possible. You made money this way, there's no question. I mean, look how perfectly it looks, or how perfectly it does work. Eventually, when the market fluctuates and you break over those levels of the 1 by 1, you're going to have to jump up into a different ratio again. Look at our one level higher. You can see things get a little more normal. They fit back into these positions a little better. Okay. This is not set right. 0.5, 0.5, and our price degree intervals 0.5. Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, that is right. I thought this 180 is a little thick there. It was making me think it was part of there was another level of 360. So that's 180. So you can see all of this time in through here, 50 cents per degree. It's just not cutting it, okay? But then eventually, when you get this fluctuation, whoops, the market moves heavier here. You see this? You can see the movement. You can see the sort of sinking away. And then as the aspects come back in, you see the transits, the transits come back in. You can see that the market fluctuates again. And you can maybe be at 20 cents per degree on the way in. And then as it fluctuates over the 20%, you might want to see 50 cents per degree. And moving back down towards 50% or 50 cents per degree, you know, finding resistance at that 180 again. Not moving up because it didn't make it over 180. When do we break over 180? When do we break up into the next level? We'll look at the volume here, right? The fluctuation volume again, just like it did here. Well, maybe we're going to break up here again. And we find that resistance there as the volume falls back down. It's trapped within this ratio, right? It's not going to break out of the 0.5 because we're not getting up to 50% in volume. Okay, finds the resistance there. Settles back down to maybe 20 cents per degree. You can see that as those transits come in, they're on the 20 cents per degree moon line. So I'm going to stop there because I think that, you know, this is basically where we're going to begin tomorrow. We're going to take this very far. We're going to try to look at each aspect of an entire transit cycle. And we're going to try to find a price square out on each one. We're going to try it on multiple markets. Okay, and then we'll also look a little bit just about beyond this, of all this intraday stuff tomorrow. We'll look a little bit at the sun. If you took my sun webinar last time, you might have a better impression of how you could use the sun on intraday, on a daily chart or a longer term cycle. We get a little bit tight. You could use the sun instead of the moon, right? But also with the moon and sun solar eclipse and lunar eclipse cycle, you can do some interesting things with time. Okay, and that's also on a daily or weekly chart. So we're going to move from intraday tomorrow a little bit too and do a little bit more of the higher time frames. So does anybody have any questions? I know I don't, somebody told me basically, I think I, kind of create everybody kind of gets stunned by what they saw, or maybe they possibly get bored and fall asleep. But generally, I hope that you noticed that the point I try to reinforce is, number one, fluctuation of ratio occurs. It's never one ratio. Don't try to find that holy grail of ratios. Don't try to find that one perfect 20 decimal number that works perfect for your market. It's not going to happen. Try multiple ratios and use nice round numbers. Okay. Okay, here we go. Some questions. You jump into incorporating these techniques into a forecasting system or trading system that you use? Yeah, definitely. I mean, basically what I'm doing here with my 6 webinars this time and 4 webinars the other time, in a sense, it's my entire system. I basically move astrology and geometry move together. If you already have a system of trading, like you say here, a forecasting system, well, this is, in a sense, this is a forecasting system. This is telling me where the price will be at a certain price at a certain time. This is an intraday system. The moon is for intraday. If you're doing this exact same thing, if you didn't take the beginner webinar, we basically did this exact same thing, but using the sun with Jupiter. Just like we did the moon with Jupiter today, well, we did the sun with Jupiter. And that's for a bigger forecast, to forecast yearly highs and yearly lows. This is to maybe forecast weekly highs and weekly lows, maybe finding even just daily highs and daily lows at this point with our 4-minute chart. But I'm sure you noticed that with our Saturn and Jupiter chart here, you were getting good weekly highs and weekly lows coming in on significant transits, okay? And that's always going to be the case. There's this push and pull between Saturn and Jupiter. I'm sure that if you use your standard impression or interpretation of astrology, you'll find that Saturn and Jupiter are going to be those two fighting forces, and truly they do fight on the market this way. But also generally you realize that if in this case of Jupiter, well, the positions are also exactly sort of opposite of each other, right? We've got Saturn here at 171 and we've got Jupiter here at 299. They're very different positions if we're moving back and forth relatable to their price time ratios. Well, the market's going to move more between 2 planets that are further away from each other in the ephemeris. So if you're trading planets that are right next to each other, if natal Sun is here and natal Jupiter's here, and you were trading just those cycles, you would find that the square outs of price would be very simple and very close to each other. Yeah. So basically, from this, if you go into next week, we're going to be dealing with the square of 9, and then I have my volume versus time fans. And if you realize, I'm already talking about volume, right? I'm already talking about volume with you. My volume versus time fans take the same logic and apply geometry, and it uses the same kind of understanding of counting bars rather than counting planetary degrees. And it's all the same logic. And what you end up with is crossings like this, but maybe a fan is something you understand more as a trading tool, and maybe that aids you, and you can definitely use a fan, just like I did before. You can use a dynamic Yan fan, put it on a low. You can just put it as the moon crosses 0 degrees or the sun crosses 0 degrees, and set it to the speed of the planet. You can see the speed of the planet there by the angle that it's set to. And I'm sure that, that's just putting the actual position of price there. You can see a good connection geometrically to these positions, right? These crossings of the fan and the way they cross over through the actual planetary geometry afterwards as well. This standard geometry that's being relatable to astrology is so much more powerful, because look, this is a point in time which you might not have had a low there or any kind of reason to put that fan there. But look how well it works, right? So yes, I mean, if you have an interest deeply in astrology, to learn this kind of information, how to understand what you're seeing here, then yes, I would read into astrology. I would read into the processes of how planetary geometry works, how the planets move. Maybe you want to know the total number of degrees per, the amount of time a particular planet takes to, go around its entire, sorry, I'm pulling up a JPEG here. This is a good list. Just using this kind of information and understanding how we can apply an earthly time scale to all of these kinds of numbers, breaking these numbers of the entire planetary geometry, this entire cycle, into different time lengths relatable to Earth time, like hours, days, weeks, months, right? So maybe that's going to help you with that. But I personally, when you say study astrology, I don't believe personally, not that it's not something that will hinder you, that's for sure. It will not stop you or pull you back, but it will send you on a bit more of a rabbit hole, astrology, and learning about every meaning of every position of every planet, and learning about every single natal position and the houses, et cetera, and maybe also all of the different relationships to different sectors that planets have. This is something that I personally do not ascribe to, and I've seen how I can predict nearly perfectly every day or over long periods of time, even without that understanding of the classic idea of Jupiter or Saturn or Uranus being a particular bullish or bearish period relatable to an aspect or transit. We don't want to only look at those meanings, but if you feel like you want to venture into it, it might help you decide, okay, what is the certain transit or aspect that I'm going to use on my particular market. Well, maybe you do a natal chart reading, but I would suggest to you use the moon with Jupiter and Saturn and try other things. Like I'm showing you, I'm on a 4-minute chart. I'm using all of the natal planets. That's over here. I'm not just using natal Jupiter, I'm using all of them because I want to see all the details. But you could just use Jupiter and Saturn. Would you just use Mars and Venus? Well, no. And maybe that's because of general astrology or classic astrology, where the longer term cycles, the bigger planets, the bigger outer planets, long cycles, they're more important. So that might be an astrological understanding in a sense. But also just timing wise or position wise on the ephemeris, we could be looking towards just finding 2 alternate cycles where Jupiter and Saturn are quite opposite on this cycle. So we use those 2 to find an alternate cycle where the price moves back and forth between their positions. Yeah, so basically that's the idea. This is there's a famous GAN guy, he's an Aussie named David Bowden, and his series is called Safety in the Markets. And the idea of all these lines and these positions that you can predefine into the future for yourself, they are part of a risk management system. So they're literally giving you levels that you don't have to worry about, that you can just decide, well, I'm in or I'm out beyond this point, and there's nothing that will turn my mind, and that's my plan. And I've got that set into the future permanently here with the moon and or whatever planet I like. But if you're already using that kind of system, that management system, just using the idea of the targets is really going to help you immediately. But if you use an RSI, if you use an indicator, I like to use volume. Again, I like to use VWAPs. I like to use volume information. So I'll put I'll like to see the lowest. Oh, that didn't work. Let's get a VWAP on our price here. Hopefully this works. Okay, that's not working very well for me. Not sure why. Well, anyways. Well, anyway, I like volume information. I like any kind of momentum information to, it helps. But if you've got the target also, and you've got your confirmation of your technical, your volume, your break of volume of a certain level, right? Yeah, I mean, definitely the esoteric stuff, as you say, it ceases to be useful. I mean, again, you might find that that's not true. You might find that in your system of practice and your research, all of the things that you see happening here where I'm showing a certain effect and it returns to the moon, etc., all these different things, these magical effects. Well, you might also find that if you knew the esoteric side of it all, you would see that, you know, this aspect or transit being a bearish transit because of the position of the moon, because of the position of something else, of some other reason, a combination of effects. Thanks, Amber. Thanks, everybody. If you've got to go, go. Don't worry about it. I'm just answering questions. Okay. Yeah, definitely. If you have detail, you know, definitely put it all together. Email me. Um, I realize that actually my biggest problem in all of this is actually my admin problems. I'm a trader. Um, I'm not an administrator. I'm not a secretary. I'm pretty terrible at it apparently. But I'll if I'm taking a time to get back to you by email, I will get back to you. I promise. Okay. It just takes me time. I like to make my answers complete. I don't like to miss any details. Okay, because I know this is very technical information. I kind of just blew through years and years of information that took me years and years to learn in a sense. So definitely take your time to go through the videos and look back on them, okay? And we'll just get further and further tomorrow. So we'll just take this further. We could work it in with a couple of the previous ideas of some planetary aspects along with our lunar aspects. The combination is going to be powerful. And then I'm also going to be showing you how you can lay basically moon lines on volume. Let's look, actually, I had that a little bit on this other, I have here, literally not just the sun and the moon drawn on price here, but I also have it on drawn on volume. This is the moon on a 1-to-1 and the moon on a 2-to-1 moving up the price of, up the levels of volume. And you can see some support and resistance, especially on the averages, and especially where it crosses these special levels, like I've got pointed out again. And this green line being the sun, and this being March 21st here. You can see some great symmetry within the cycles of volume. Okay, so you can take this stuff very far. It's not just price. We could also predict volume. We can predict all kinds of things with this system. Okay. So I'm going to send you all this information. You'll get the Optimum workbook. You'll get the TradingView charts. These two TradingView charts are basically the same, but I'll send you the one I made today, and then tomorrow after we get through this stuff about the volume analysis, I will then send you this copy. Okay, guys. So thank you very much. I will close off now, and if you have any questions, get back to me by email, and we will move on tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Nikki. Thanks a lot, Amber, Nick. Dom was here before. Some people might have, we might be in the middle of the night in places. It's approaching about 9:45, so that's about 2.5 hours. About tomorrow will basically be about the same amount of time. Okay. Dom, thanks a lot, man. You're there. I didn't put you to sleep. I know this stuff is it could be heavy, but it's a lot of information. But once you take it into stride, you'll realize it's just one simple process that I'm taking, with many different approaches to that same exact simple process. Thanks, man. I was certainly mind blown at some point with this stuff, and now today I basically I can't help but look at my moon lines and look at my sun lines and make sure I know where they are, because it's going to tell me where the price is going to go, at least within a certain amount of time. Oh, thanks. From Greece, 4:45 a.m. Amazing. Thank you, man. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to close it up now. And again, just email me by any way. Twitter, email is fine, and we'll be back with it tomorrow. Have a good evening or day or whatever time it is where you are.